Hey folks, I'm Alex Dowd.
And I'm Katie Rife.
Today we're going to be talking about one of last year's most divisive movies. It's Todd Phillips' supervillain origin story, Joker.
Ooh, dangerous. Welcome to Film Club.
So if you looked at last year's movies, I think if you asked yourself what was the big conversation piece of last year? What was the movie that inspired the most talk online?
Well, the last film we covered, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's a strong contender.
It was until
yes,
a couple months
Venice.
later
Yes.
at the Venice Film Festival where Todd Phillips' Joker premiered.
I think everyone kind of expected this one to be a hot button topic. The screening we went to had metal detectors and more security than you usually see at these screenings, because that was an early narrative about the film, that it was going to spark all this violence in movie theaters.
Which was highly speculative. And
I'm glad it didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, of course. Yeah. Some would argue that the movie is too banal to do that. But I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I'm kind of an agnostic on Joker.
Do you think that it's a dangerous film?
I don't think it's a dangerous film.
Yeah.
I understood why people thought that about it.
Right.
Although I will say that a lot of that was coming from people who hadn't yet seen the film.
Yes, that's true.
You know, it was just a raw
Reactions to
speculation
headlines.
about it, right? So we should probably say something about what the film is for those who
Yes.
don't know. I don't know how it's possible. You
It's
wouldn't know
called
what this
Joker.
is now. Todd Phillips, who made the Hangover films, had an idea a couple years ago that he wanted to do an origin story of the Joker, the Batman's main heavy, you know, homicidal clown, that sort of thing. And
you know, perhaps significantly, a character that had already made the leap into, you know, cinematic mainstream respectability, with Heath Ledger getting an Oscar for playing the Joker.
sure, of course, yep. He's also been portrayed by Jack Nicholson, by Jared Leto, somewhat recently. Mark Hamill voiced him on Batman the Animated Series. That's one of the more popular takes. This version of him is played by Joaquin Phoenix. The film is set in Gotham City in roughly 1981. The film never
around
says,
there.
but it's around there.
Gotham City being a stand-in for New York here. Because
Yeah. I mean, this is very much a New York from the New Hollywood era. You know? Very obviously a New York as seen through Martin Scorsese's lens.
Yes, very much.
Two Scorsese films are heavy influences on this one, Taxi Driver and also The King of Comedy.
Yep.
Both with De Niro, who plays a supporting role in the film. He plays Murray Franklin. He's a talk show host on the film. He's basically in the role that Jerry Lewis had in The King of Comedy. So we follow Phoenix's character. He's a kind of for-hire clown, and he suffers from a kind of unidentified, unspecified mental illness, and the city is cutting funds to healthcare options and mental health options. And the movie is sort of about looking what happens to this character as this city kind of abandons him.
I mean, I do agree with Joker that it's essential to have, you know, public mental health clinic facilities.
I would agree too. I don't think it's actually a super controversial point to make.
No, it's not. I mean,
And there are things I actually quite like about this film.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, what I do like about this movie is that we're now living in the age of the superhero industrial complex. You know, there's a new superhero movie every month at this point, you know, and some of the studios, particularly Marvel, has kind of turned this into an assembly line.
Yeah.
They all operate by a certain formula, and I mostly like those films. I like the Marvel movies. I know you're not a big fan.
Well, I just don't keep up with them because they're very well covered by our staff, and, you know, like, I'm more of a Star Wars girl.
Yeah. And this has its own formula in a way. One could say it's
Well, let me ask you a
cribbed from
question
Scorsese.
about this. Why didn't Logan get this same kind of attention? Because you want to talk about doing something different with a superhero movie and taking a more serious tack in it. That movie did that.
It's a good question. That's a lot better film.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Logan is a better movie than Joker. Then why is Joker getting all these Oscar nominations?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that, for one thing, I do think that the craft in Joker is maybe better than the craft in Logan.
Yeah, that's
Logan's
fair.
a well-made film, but I think that
But it's more pulpy, it's more comic booky.
It is a little bit more. This thing sort of wears its pretensions of seriousness on its sleeve, you know? It's a movie that announces, honestly, with almost every moment that this is a serious work of art.
Yes, capital S serious.
The thing is, I don't think you have to agree with the film to have fun with it.
Okay.
It's a very self-serious film in a lot of ways.
Yes, which is why the thing that kind of made me roll my eyes when I was watching it is the deeper it gets into Batman lore, the goofier I think the movie is.
I would agree. The movie does sort of say like, oh, you know, this isn't your kid brother's Batman movie.
But then they keep fucking bringing up
But then
Batman.
it does the same thing that a lot of comic book movies does, which is that it eventually it ties itself to that mythology.
Yes.
You know, a purer version of this maybe would have said, you know what, we're just going to look at this character, and we're not going to make all these inways into the Batman mythology.
If there had been no mention of anything in the Batman universe up until the very end of this movie, I would have respected that.
I enjoy Phoenix in it as well. I agree
Sure,
that it's
he's a
not
good
his best
actor.
performance. It is maybe a more showboating performance from him than we're used to. I think it's a mannered portrait of mental illness.
He really throws himself into the role physically, which is cool.
He gets that that kind of he's very bony, and he also gets that kind of angular quality to the way that the Joker moves as a character.
Yeah.
He has these long limbs, you know.
As a physical performance, I do think it's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think the craft is pretty strong, even if the movie is kind of doing, I've seen it twice, and I think it's kind of doing an imitation of a serious art movie, but the pleasures are still kind of there, you know? The cinematography is beautiful, as you said.
The cinematography is really good.
And I quite like the score, to be honest.
Yeah, the score is good, too.
It's super bombastic, but it's also really effective, and I think that some of the best scenes in the movie benefit from that music. And there are scenes where I think that this approaches the movie that it really wants to be, such as the scene after Joaquin's character, Arthur Fleck, commits his first act of violence.
Right.
He kills 3 guys on a subway, which, by the way, is that whole scene is a reference to a race-related attack in the early '80s, which is one way in which this film kind of hedges its bets, I think. Like if it were really, if it really had the courage of its convictions,
if the Joker was racist.
Right.
Yeah.
But the movie doesn't want to risk that kind of.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's the big scene where Arthur's had enough and he dyes his hair green and he turns into the Joker. And it's supposed to be this big, serious moment. And then he undercuts it with a Gary Glitter needle drop. What?
But I kind of like that scene too.
I
I know I'm
just
in that
think it's
minority
so
among our
wacky.
particular circle, but I think that scene works because at heart, Arthur is a dork. Arthur is the type of guy who would hear that music at like a ball game, and in his head would think, like, imagine myself on like center stage dancing to that. He's a dork.
Extrapolating a little much
No,
on the character.
I really think that he's that it's a maybe Phillips thinks it's a genuinely cool needle drop. I think that is a needle drop that Arthur would enjoy and pick for himself. He's hearing that shit in his head, you know?
Sure, but I don't know. I just think that Phillips genuinely thought it was awesome.
Maybe. I think it's deliberately dorky personally, but we'll agree to disagree on this point.
That's a interesting point because the movie is very much from his point of view. So
I mean,
I'll consider it.
I remember talking with another guy, Chicago critic, Nick Allen, about this when I saw it for the second time in Chicago, and how if Arthur were a comic in 2019, he would probably actually have kind of a following. There are people who would dig his anti-comedy.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah. What would he call it? The
It's like a little Neil Hamburgian, you know?
If Neil Hamburger was serious.
Was serious, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
If that was a sincere act.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there probably is somebody out there doing that shtick.
Yeah, totally.
And they probably really loved the movie Joker.
Yep.
This movie, I don't hate it. I don't think it's one of the worst films of the year. Because
we did list it as one of the worst films of the year, which is controversial.
Yes. A lot of people vote on that, is all I have to say.
A number of writers vote on that.
Yep.
I considered overruling them because, neither of us think it's that bad.
I think it's pretty mediocre, honestly. Yeah. It's a mediocre movie with, like you said, nothing really in particular to say. It's got some good points. The cinematography is good at times. It's Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor, obviously, even though this, maybe you should actually just watch You Were Never Really Here instead. But, he did a good job in the movie. He really threw himself into it. So I don't think that it's worthless as a piece of filmmaking. It's just kind of like a dumber rehash of already existing good movies. It's taking a Scorsese movie and putting Batman in it. It reminds me of being in freshman screenwriting class. But this movie, you know, even if it's not actually, you know, real world dangerous, it is it did seem to me to be designed to provoke hostile reactions, to own the libs, so to speak.
I don't know if it has that coherent of an ideology.
Oh, you don't really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's particularly interested in trolling.
Really? Because
yeah.
the whole thing to me seemed like one big exercise in a movie just designed to make the elites mad.
See, I think it's 100% interested in capital. I think there's something a little opportunistic about its use of particular imagery. I think it very much wants to be a film that's tapping into the zeitgeist and in a kind of general cultural anxiety.
Okay.
I think it's doing it in kind of a wishy-washy way.
Yeah, general is definitely the word for this sort of anxiety that's being expressed in the film.
And the movie, there are real topics to be gleaned from the film. Whether or not the film's doing it intelligently or the film's doing it thoughtfully is another question.
Right, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I suppose that it's a matter of taste, whether, you know, like whether you think that all the movie's elements fit together or not. Obviously, it's very controversial, but there is one way that it's very interesting in a movie to watch is that it does set a precedent for R-rated DCEU movies. Like, for example, Birds of Prey, which is coming out in a few weeks, is going to be R-rated, and it looks to have a very strong director's point of view in that one, too. And even though this isn't an official DCEU movie, if it means that we're going to switch things up and allow creators more leeway in comic book movies, I'm cool with that.
That's the thing I like the most about it, honestly, about Joker, is in an age when we have so many comic book movies, I really like to see one that has some kind of vision. I mean, I do think that this one is kind of borrowed. You know, he's kind of cosplaying Martin Scorsese. But just seeing one that has an aesthetic identity, one that has some kind of philosophy, even if it's a shop-worn one or kind of a shallow one, just a movie that has a visual sense that's a little bit different than the rest of these.
All right, everybody, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us to talk about Joker. Please be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it. And we will be back soon to discuss another Best Picture nominee, the car racing movie Ford versus Ferrari.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.